Here's something that will bother you. The founders who survived, the ones who built Airbnb, Canva, Atlassian, Stripe, they weren't smarter than the ones who failed. They weren't better funded. They didn't have a secret formula. In fact, research shows the first time founders succeed at almost exactly the same rate as repeat founders. 20% versus 18%. Almost no difference. So if it's not intelligence, not experience, not money, what actually separates the 10% who makes it? The answer is not what most people expect. And when I found it, it reframed everything I thought I understood about why startups succeed. Because the difference isn't in the startup, it's in the founder specifically. In one thing, the surviving founders did, the others consistently didn't. Let's get into it. CB Insights found something when they looked at the startups that made it through. Not the unicorns, not the billion-dollar exits, just the ones that survived, that found their footing and kept going. They shared five characteristics, not five things they were born with, five things they did. First, they solved a problem they personally lived. The strongest founders had a genuine personal relationship with the problem they were solving. Not a market opportunity they read about, not a gap they identified in a spreadsheet. Something they had felt, something that had frustrated them, cost them, or kept them at night. Brian couldn't afford his San Francisco rent. That's why Airbnb exists. The empathy for the user was built in because he was the user. Second, they had two founders, not one. The data on this is striking. Startups with two co founders raise 30% more investment and grow three times faster than solo founders. Not because two people work twice as hard, but because the right co founder gives you something no amount of money can buy. Someone who tells you the truth when you're wrong, and someone to hold the line when everything feels like it's falling apart. Third, they stayed close to their users obsessively. Not surveys, not dashboards, not net promoter scores, physical proximity, conversations, watching people actually use the product. Remember Brian getting on a plane to New York. That wasn't a strategy, it was a reflex. The surviving founders treated user feedback not as data to analyze, but as oxygen to breathe. Fourth, they pivoted on signals, not on opinions. His critical distinctions most founders miss. Bad pivots happen because an investor said something, or a competitor launched something, or the founders got bored. Good pivots happen because the data said something, clearly, repeatedly, undeniably. Survivors set explicit triggers. If this metric doesn't hit this number by this date, we change. Not we will see how it goes. A specific commitment to a specific signal. Fifth, and this one is the one nobody talks about. They were comfortable not knowing. Most founders project certainty they don't have. To investors, to their team, to themselves. The ones who survived had a different relationship with certainty. They don't pretend to have answers they didn't have. They build systems to find answers. There is a profound difference between a founder who says, we know our market, and the one who says, here's how we are finding out. One is confidence, the other is wisdom. And in a startup, wisdom survives longer than confidence every single time. Now I want to bring this closer to home because if you are watching this from Australia, specifically from Melbourne, I wanted to hear something that most people in this country still haven't fully understood. We are living in one of the best startup ecosystems in the world right now, not in 5 years, right now. In 2025, Australian startups raised 5.48 billion in funding. That's a 31% increase from the year before. 66% of all Australian startup deals in 2025 included at least one international investor. R16Z, Bessemer, Lightspeed, the biggest venture capital firms on the planet are putting money into Australian companies. We have 32 unicorns and two of the most important technology companies of the last decade, Atlassian, Canva, both built here. Canva, a $49 billion company, started in Perth. Atlassian, the company behind Jira and Confluence, used by hundreds of thousands of teams worldwide, started in Sydney. Neither of them moved to Silicon Valley to build. They built here, proved it here, and then went global. Melbourne specifically is a part of one of the fastest growing startup ecosystems in the Asia Pacific region. Access to world class universities, a genuinely diverse talent pool, government R&D incentives that actually work, and a culture that slowly genuinely is starting to celebrate the founders instead of being suspicious of them. I'm telling you this not to make you feel good. I'm telling you this because one of the most common reasons why people don't start something is geography. The opportunity is in America. Our need to move to Silicon Valley. The ecosystem here isn't ready. Canva proved all three of those wrong. The ecosystem is here. The question is whether you are paying attention to it. So let's bring this entire series to a close. We started with a stat 90% of startups fail. We found out the number is contested, context dependent, and largely misunderstood. We found the pattern 6 stages that compound quietly and takes most startups down before the founders even realize what's happening. We found the Airbnb story, a company that went through every single stage of that pattern and survived because one founder got on a plane and went to look at the actual problem. And we found the 5 things survivors consistently do, the others don't. Solve a problem they lived, build with a co founder who complements them, stay obsessively close to their users, pivot on signals, not opinions, and stay comfortable in the uncertainty. Here's what strikes me most after going through all of this research: none of these 5 things require money. None of them require a degree. None of them require connections or luck or being in the right city. They require one thing: honesty. Honest about whether you have validated the problem. Honest about whether the signals are telling you something you don't want to hear. Honest about whether you are building for the user or for yourself. The startups that failed weren't dishonest people. They were just people who found it easier to keep going than to stop and look. Brian stopped and looked, and that's the only reason you have heard of Airbnb. So here's my question for you, and I genuinely want to know the answer. Drop it in comments. Whether you have a startup idea, a business you have been thinking about, or just something you want to build one day. What's the one thing you already know is broken about it that you have been choosing not to look at? You know what it is. The question is whether you are going to keep ignoring it or whether, like Brian, you are going to get on a plane